Hi, it's Ray Schelin from ProShaper Sheet Metal in Charlton, Massachusetts. And as promised, this is part one of building an E-Type nose. It's a 1962 E-Type Jaguar nose, and it's in pristine condition. I got it from a friend of mine. Let me borrow it from hilltopjags.com, and he sells XKs and 120, 140, 150s and E-Types all over the world. So if you're looking for one of those, get in touch with Dan or Wray. And he let me borrow this, and now we're copying it in aluminum. And to do it, there's a bunch of ways to do it. You can do this with making what's a traditional wood buck. You could do it making a wire form buck. You can do it making a fiberglass full surface buck. And a lot of people, well, probably a half a dozen people around the world have part of their business around building these E-Type noses. There's quite a few of the E-Types made, and a lot of people like the lightweight aluminum noses. So, because it's a popular product and I had access to this, I decided this would be a great project to feature in a build series. So we've got this, and we've chosen the flexible shape pattern method. That's a technique I developed about 20 years ago, and I'm going to describe in this video what the flexible shape pattern is and what's the advantages of using a flexible shape pattern as opposed to a buck or paper patterns or all of the above. So the procedure is just putting this low stick tape down first, and that is done in regions that I've marked out. You can see this blue fine line tape. I use that a lot in the shop. So I broke the panel down into two sections here in the front nose, and then there's a section here, and the similar section over there. Same thing here, and then this one and this one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There'll be 8 pieces in total in making this nose. And the most difficult part of this is this rolled piece right here, and it's right in this corner here. Now, a lot of the people that make these will use a full surface reinforced fiberglass buck, or they use a high-tech plastic that's been milled or molded, and they can actually anneal this section and hammer form this in, which makes it a lot easier to do. We probably won't be doing that. We're going to be using the flexible shape pattern. So what makes this difficult is getting this roll in the right spot, and this is the spot that's the most difficult right here. There's going to be a lot of shrinking that's going to happen here. Another solution for that would be to take a little pie cut out of here and then weld it up. If you do your welds right, the welds are as strong as the parent metal. You don't have to shrink as much if you do it that way. I don't know if I'll do it that way, but we'll see. So this is the first layer of tape, and on these two front panels I've got all these markings on here, and I'll try to explain some of the markings. These I've considered finished. All this information is written on the first layer of tape, which is a low stick tape, and the purpose for that is it's the same thing as a mold release agent. It allows you to take the tape off. But that's not going to happen until we get a packing tape which has fiberglass reinforcing in it. That'll go over this tape. That's the tape element that welds it all together. So we're going to do this panel first, and Mark, my cameraman and taper, has taped this all up for me, and now I've marked this. I just want to describe what some of these markings are. One of the things that all these markings do is they do the exact same thing that a buck will do, a station buck is, but a station buck is internal. This stuff is all going to be external. So all these black lines here There'll be one here in the center, one here, and one here. Those are lines all going this way, so 1, 2, 3, 4 going this way. That would be stations. So we're going to make a gauge for each one of these stations. If I place these in the same spot, the gauge will be valid for both left and right. These lines running across are stations also, but they're going across instead of forward and back. So all total, we came up with, I believe, 13 station lines on this whole front nose section. There's one here, there's one down here, there's one diagonal one here. And if we find that we don't have enough information, we can always add another station line. So every one of these station lines or gauge lines also has the index point. So we make a gauge. It'll fit that really good. I used to make the gauges out of little strips of 18 gauge that I would shear on my shear and then use a shrinker stretcher to bend them. But it took a lot of time, so now I make them out of some nice new cardboard stock that I buy. You'll make the gauge pretty quickly with a razor blade, and then you can sand it in and it'll fit there. And what that index line does is tell you the orientation of the gauge. Usually you put the index line for the gauge off center somewhere, so it's favoring this side, so you know the gauge goes that one direction. Now we also have panel numbers. We have a little title block on here. It says 62 Jaguar E-Type Bonnet. All of these will all have this information later. Right now we're just concerned with this front section. We also have, these are weld witness lines. This panel and this panel, when they're done, will get welded right along this line. It'll be a perfect straight line weld, and that's the witness line. And it also acts as a straight line that you know when these panels come together, not only do they line up like this, but they don't twist or come off of that straight. So that line will have to be straight, and all this information eventually will get transferred through little holes we punch in the flexible shape pattern, you'll see that later, onto the panels that we make. So we've got gauge numbers, we've got panel numbers, and we also have a radius zone. This radius zone tells us where we have to bend. We've got the index points for the welding here, here, and here. We've got the index points for the gauges, so there's quite a bit of information. Now we also written add ½ inch because this is a weld zone. So when I cut my blank, I know that I have to have at least a ½ inch extra on a weld zone. Over here I've got a joggle, and it's got a flange joggle. So I've got about at least a 3/4 of an inch that I need here, so I've added 1 1/8 inches. There's a flange over here where it butts up to the fender. I've added 1.5 inches here, and there's a flange under here where it bolts up to the bottom piece. I've added 1.5 inches here. And on this roll, I'll add a ½ inch also. So that gives me enough material to make sure that I make my blank right. These are all instructions, and what this is it's a blueprint for making this part, essentially. It's a flexible blueprint. This could be folded up and it's easy to ship. So it's a really nice system. It'll store for about 5 years. That's about its lifespan. You might be able to get a little bit longer than that out of it. And you can make multiple parts off of these. Now technically you only have to make one side. You go through a center line and you only make one side, and then you can flip it inside out and you can get both sides. But in this one we decided to do both sides. So we've got a left and a right on this one. Now what this allows you to do is it's a multi-purpose tool. It's a measuring tool. It's a guide to action. It's a welding assistant tool because it tells you where your welds are got to be. It tells you where you have to stretch and shrink. And all that will show in part 2 after I peel this off. And first we got to put the other second layer of tape off before we can peel it off. And you'll see the process of in part 2 and part 3 of actually making the aluminum panel. All right, here we have the E-Type nose. This is when we first started. We washed it down with some acetone, cleaned it up really good so the tape will stick good. Put the initial blue tape on, and here's Mark putting the low stick tape on first after we've demarked these first 2 sections of the front nose section. If it doesn't matter with the panel, you can put this tape on and carefully use a straight edge razor and cut the tape, the low stick tape. The blue tape acts as a fence or a barrier, a guide. So you bring the low stick tape up to that blue tape. You can use a razor to cut it, but in this case here we didn't want to do any damage to the part, to this front nose piece. So Mark took a superfine Sharpie and ran it along the border with that blue tape. I think you can see the line there. Then one by one, you pull the low stick tape up and then cut it with a scissor and then let it down again. Now, you can see there's a little bit of gap between all of these rows of tape. You can run it right up against the edge of the next tape, the first layer, the second layer, or the second strip rather of the tape can be run right against each other. But oftentimes what they do is they tend to overlap, and that's what Mark is doing right here, is he's cutting the overlap off. When I came up with this system, the first panel that I made, I allowed all these overlaps, and then what happens is if you turn this flexible shape pattern inside out, which is normally what I do. We're not doing this on this project. We're making individual left and right flexible shape patterns. But if you had a true dead center line, you could turn this left panel inside out and make a right panel. So you only have to really copy one side of the hood, but we've opted to do the whole thing on this example. And you can see now Mark has cut out all those overlaps. Now the reason for cutting the overlaps out is that when you do flip them inside out, the overlaps tend to just, because it's 2 low stick tapes, or it's actually a low stick tape, it won't stick really well and it starts to get all flappy and it starts to fall apart if you turn it inside out to use the inside out function of it. So as a general rule, we tend to not have any overlaps on the first layer of tape, which is this low stick tape. This is acting as a mold release agent. If you used a regular masking tape, you wouldn't be able to pull it off in one piece. It'll start to break on you. You use the blue vinyl tape as the barrier. In this case here, now Mark has doubled up that blue vinyl tape on the center barrier line. And you never encapsulate the blue tape into the flexible shape pattern either. That's not good because the blue vinyl tape is very stretchy and it'll act like an elastic inside the flexible shape pattern when you're all done. And you're going to see that this becomes a storybook. Now, what's the deal with a flexible shape pattern? What's its advantage? Well, you can turn it inside out. That's a major advantage. A situation such as if you're doing restoration and you have rust on one side of the car, say the left side of the car, but the right side of the car is really good. Well, you can take the information from the right side of the car with a flexible shape pattern, turn the flexible shape pattern inside out, and you can make a perfect panel for your other side, your left side. So that's one advantage. And also, because it's flexible, but what it does is it captures the DNA of the area value of the panel. And then later when we mark it all up, you'll see it's going to have all these gauge lines on it. And those are the method we use to capture the arrangement value. So with the gauges, the flexible shape pattern captures the area value of a surface and the arrangement value.
depends on how many gauges you put on. The gauges are also acting as external stations. So you, in some instances, if you wanted to try to make a wood buck or a wire form buck by copying the insides of a panel, oftentimes there's internal structure there, such as a hood. So if you have a hood panel or a door panel that has all that internal structure, you can't make a gauge of some sort or a buck station that will fit into that outside or inside surface. But always the outside surfaces are available because that's what shows. That's the aesthetic element. So by virtue of that all being available, we can make our stations all external. So when we make the new panel, all those stations will index on properly because of the flexible shape pattern. You're going to see that in part 2 and 3 as I'm making the actual aluminum panels. So Mark is going to continue on taping up the whole front bonnet top section. We still have the 2 fenders to do, and then the lower underneath pan on the front. So there's quite a bit to it. And then there's a lot of internal ductwork and baffles, and to make one of these E-type hoods is a big undertaking. And of course, it all has to fit together perfectly. And that's what the flexible shape pattern does. It's a blueprint for making this thing. It's exactly like a blueprint. And it also has the advantage of helping you locate where the welds are going to be, and that'll be all in the markings that we're going to do. And it also has the ability to allow you to read the panel out of arrangement while you're working on it. So if you watched my video the other day on area and arrangement, you can see what a big advantage that is you can work the panel out of arrangement. And that's like one of the big secrets of the craft of metal shaping coach building is working a panel out of arrangement. It allows you to smooth areas that would take, high crown tools otherwise, unless you can take and get that panel out of arrangements. Now, there are some shapes that don't allow a true out of arrangement situation, and usually they're bowl shapes, but most uh, car panels, you can take them out of arrangement, and that allows you a much easier access to um, working the panel. Okay, now Mark is putting on the reinforcement tape. It has the fiberglass fibers in it. That's the tape that holds it all together. And in order to hold it all together, it has to be overlapped. So the first layer, no overlaps, because that makes it impossible for it to come apart from itself when you turn it inside out. This layer has to be overlapped. It totally welds it, and it makes it a very strong, flexible shape pattern. I said they have a lifespan of at least 5 years. The biggest problem with it is if the sun gets in them. If you keep them in a dark area, it's actually better. And here in New England, in Massachusetts, the humidity hits really bad in August. So when it's really hot and humid, it also will reactivate the sticky on the first layer of tape, which is going to be exposed. Now we're going to hit that with uh, some plaster of Paris. That kills the sticky, and you'll see that when we take this off. We won't be able to take this off till we get the gauges made. So after Mark gets this all taped up with a 1/4 inch at least overlap, then uh, the gauges will all be made, and then we'll finally take it off. So you can see he's being careful to make sure he's got that good 1/4 inch margin to ensure that that all welds together very well. You can go more than a 1/4 inch. You can go 3/8 or 1/2 inch or 100% overlap. Waste of tape a little bit, but it's not a problem. Now, I've shown this on the various forums and on the internet and various spots several times how to do the flexible shape patterns. Somehow it got garbled that I put 2 layers of this tape. Now I only put one layer, and one layer is sufficient.
Alright, as you can see now, Mark has got this whole front all covered with the second layer with the fiberglass reinforced tape, which holds it all together. And he also made all of the gauges out of cardboard, and they're all numbered and indexed. Each one has a gauge number, it has a panel number, and it has a little story on it to tell you what it is. 6 months from now you might not know what it fits. So it's best to put a lot of information, put the information on both sides too. Each gauge will have an index point. The index point is right here. There it goes. This gauge works for both this left side and this right side. So it fits really nice. Now the gauge sets the arrangement. The flexible shape pattern will set the area value. You can also get a lot of the arrangement out of just the flexible shape pattern, but the definitive last 5% will come from the gauges. That ensures super accuracy. You can make a panel that's passable, very good panel, with just a flexible shape pattern with no gauges on it if you have an idea of what it's supposed to flow like. But if you make the gauges, you're going to absolutely ensure accuracy. This is an external station buck. So that was gauge 4. We got gauge 3. Now, I put these lines on here and I'm trying to pick up a lot of the information. If I didn't put enough information while we're making the panel and I find out that we're lacking in information, we just throw in another line and make another gauge. Now I used to put all this information on the top surface here, but what would happen is after you use your sweaty hands on it, it would wipe off the magic marker. Now the magic marker is all hermetically sealed underneath this translucent layer of shipping tape, and it'll never come off. So it's a pretty nice rugged setup and it'll last a long time. All of these gauges will punch a little hole. We'll punch a hole in the corner over here. We'll put it on a little hook and you can hang this on your garage wall and it'll last for like 5 years. So we've made them nice. They all fit pretty good. And we've got ones going this way and we've got ones going this way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to peel this off. All right, so now what we're going to do is carefully remove just this panel here, and then we're going to dust it. When you remove them, you got to be careful that it doesn't separate. And it's good to have a little razor blade. I just clipped my fingernails here. I'm having a hard time pulling the tape up, but okay, it's going. And you carefully pull the tape up. You wouldn't be able to do this unless you had this low stick tape. What happens on regular tape is it just won't come up. All right, I've got a razor blade and I'm going to persuade these corners to come up. My goal is to not have this separate. It will separate. It started separating a little bit right here. I don't know if you can see it right here. And it's not a problem. You can just burnish it down with your finger again, see, and then it pulled right up. So there's another one. This might be a good one to pull out this way carefully. And you want to do it nice and slow. Take your time about it. Now this is a low stick. But if you stick it to itself, it becomes a high stick. So you don't want to do that, otherwise you're going to have to make this whole flexible shape pattern over again. So I'm carefully pulling this up. I'm going to pull this whole thing right in one shot. And then we're going to dust it with some plaster of Paris. That kills the sticky. And then you'll see what we have is we have captured the DNA of this shape. And I'm pulling it off this way because this has this radius down here. And if I try to pull it from this way here, I don't think it'll be too successful. This way here, the radius will pull right off, no problem. So it's not separating, just a little bit at the beginning. If it does separate, you just push it back, burnish the tape on. So there you go. Okay, now this is the back side of the flexible shape pattern, and I got a couple paint brushes. Like this is just plaster Paris. If you want them to smell nice, you can put baby powder on. It's just to kill the sticky. The sticky will come back. I usually after about a year, usually in August here in Massachusetts where it's pretty hot, it'll reactivate the sticky. The best storage of this is if you put wax paper on this after, and the wax paper will ensure that it doesn't stick to itself again. Keep them out of the sun and they will last a long time. Now, one of the comments on my YouTube channel was I was mentioning a flexible shape pattern, and one of the comments was, oh boy, you should use paper patterns, because paper patterns tell you exactly where you have to shrink and stretch. Paper patterns do have a lot of value. I use paper patterns on some circumstances, but if I have a full surface like what I have on this E-Type nose, there is nothing better than a flexible shape pattern. What you're seeing here is the DNA of that panel. Now it won't stick to itself now, we're covered there, and you can see this is why I call it a flexible shape pattern, because it's flexible. And if that sheet metal that the E-Type nose was made out of was very flexible like this, it would be doing the same thing. This has captured the DNA of the panel. So what do we do now to make this panel? This will tell us exactly what we need to do. We put it on a flat table like this, and you'll see what's happening here. You've got a big hump. That hump does not look anything like this. So okay, here's a side-by-side comparison. The panel, the flexible shape pattern of that panel. How do I read this? Well, it takes a little time to learn how to read these, but this tells a tremendous story. Number one, we have all this information that we put in on with the magic markers. We've got the roll zone. We've got over here, actually I didn't put the roll zone in here, so we'll have to put that in after. There is a reverse curve right here. If you run a straight edge here, you'll see a little valley right in here. That's a reverse curve. When you have a reverse curve present, you'll have a looseness like this. It won't want to stay down. This is a standard compound curve all in here, and then there's some reverse over in here. This is an edge stretch that needs to happen right here. There's extra material. So we can make this panel very easily. My preferred method to make this panel would be the English wheel. But as you see me making this panel, you'll see that I will shrink and I will stretch, and I will use a mallet, and I'll use my shrinking facilitator, and I will follow the dictate of this blueprint, the flexible shape pattern. And the panel I make this will fit perfectly on the panel. Then I will set the arrangement, which means to turn this radius here. And this will flip up over here, and this will come down over here, and it'll be perfect. It'll fit right on there beautifully. all of these lines where the gauges go, I'm going to punch holes in here, and that allows me to properly index where all the gauges go, and you'll see that process. But that's going to be in the next video. This is just covering how to do the flexible shape pattern and how the flexible shape pattern works or looks after you pull it off the panel. And if you haven't used one of these, it might not make sense to you. But you'll see in the process showing the E-type nose being built. So that's it for now. Wray Schelin ProShaper sheet metal.